Forget Indiana Jones, real treasure hunters wore pointy hats. Meet the alchemists, those bearded eccentrics holed up in candlelit labs, desperately trying to turn their junk drawer into gold. The myth? Alchemists were Renaissance lottery addicts, endlessly chasing a golden payday and maybe a velvet robe upgrade. If that were true, modern chemists would just be plotting to invent a tastier chocolate bar. But here's the glittering truth. Alchemy was the original mashup of philosophy, chemistry, and a dash of spiritual sparkle. These pioneers gave us distillation and crystallization, handing future scientists the keys to real chemical magic. Sure, some dreamed of easy riches, but many chased deeper transformations, like turning confusion into wisdom. Their cryptic recipes weren't just theatrics. Dodging public bonfires was smart, and nothing says cool like a secret code. In the end, most alchemists didn't strike gold, but their experiments exploded into new medicines, better metals, and even the first pharmacies. Now that's a legendary legacy. This common portrayal suggests their main goal was to transform base metals into precious gold. Picture a huddle of ancient gentlemen in robes, hunched over bubbling cauldrons, desperately trying to turn dull lead into gleaming gold, while their landlords insist on rent, paid in plain old silver. That's the cinematic vision of alchemists. The medieval lottery players, just with more explosions and fewer jackpots. According to legend, alchemy's job was simple. Grab some boring metals, chant a few cryptic words, and voila! Mountains of gold. If that worked, Fort Knox would be out of business. But reality tells a different tale. The quest for the Philosopher's Stone, basically the original clickbait, captivated imaginations. But actual alchemists were early multitaskers long before coffee shops made it trendy. Their wish list wasn't limited to gold. They craved spiritual enlightenment, perfect health, and the elusive elixir of eternal life. Along the way, they dabbled in everything from chemistry to astrology and even pioneered early lab techniques like distillation and filtration. So did they turn lead into gold? Nope. But their wild experiments did transform ignorance into knowledge. Modern science owes them a nod and maybe a fire extinguisher upgrade. However, their working environments and practices were often shrouded in mystery and secrecy. Picture the mysterious alchemist, lone wolf, locked in a candlelit dungeon, muttering to their lead. Popular legend paints these proto-scientists as cloak-wrapped weirdos who never saw the sun, their only pals bubbling flasks and existential dread. But let's add a pinch of philosopher's salt. Alchemists were actually some of the era's sharpest networkers. Instead of sulking solo, many swapped lively letters, published eccentric books, and forged friendships from Paris to Prague. Think medieval LinkedIn, but with ink-stained fingers and way more chatter about mercury poisoning. Far from being banished to dungeons, alchemists often strutted their stuff in universities and royal courts, debating arcana in scenes less Prisoner of Azkaban and more Great British Bake Off. If the star bake was gold. Yes, secrecy was key, but less to summon demons and more to keep nosy neighbors and inquisitors away from their prized turnip-into-gold recipe. Honestly, alchemy group projects happened so often. You'd think they invented the medieval group chat, just with worse handwriting and zero memes. If every alchemist had truly worked alone, historians would be left with little more than a smudged journal and an empty cask of dubious wine. So next time you picture an alchemist, imagine lively gatherings, patron-funded experiments, and secret labs doubling as kitchens, complete with scolding relatives and the smell of burnt bread. Such secrecy has led many to believe that alchemists' contributions to science were negligible. Did you hear about alchemists turning lead into disappointment? It never gets old, unlike the lead. Alchemy often gets dismissed as medieval pseudo-magic, about as scientific as a Hogwarts summer camp. Sure, their headline act, turning rusty metals into shiny gold, smelled more like a get-rich-quick scheme Vegas wouldn't touch. But cut these dreamers some slack! Alchemists were obsessive note-takers, chronicling every fizz, fume, failed potion, and questionable haircut with fanatical precision. Their love affair with lab gear gave us the beaker and flask, without which science class would just be kids waving sticks and yelling, "Axio knowledge." In chasing gold, they accidentally unlocked key chemical secrets like distillation and fermentation. Imagine a world without spirits, the liquid kind. Eventually, Robert Boyle and his crew ditched the gold rush for real science, kickstarting modern chemistry. So next time you pop a pill or sip a cocktail, raise a glass to these accidental trailblazers, science's original glow-up crew. This perception contributed to the idea that alchemy faded away as modern science emerged. Is alchemy just the awkward ancestor of chemistry, skulking off stage as science donned its crisp lab coat? Not quite. Calling alchemy failed science is about as accurate as lead pretending to be gold. In truth, its quirky ideas stuck around for centuries, often sharing lab benches with what we now proudly call experiments. As the scientific method squared its shoulders, alchemy quietly gifted the world improved metals, dazzling dyes, and the earliest stabs at pharmaceuticals. And guess what? The superheroes of science, Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle, didn't exactly ghost alchemy. They flirted with it long after hours. No dramatic lab breakups here. Early chemists often played double duty, one day mixing potions, the next dissecting their secrets. Sure, alchemy's mysticism faded, but its spirit, curiosity, transformation, and the occasional lab chaos lives on. Even as the periodic table strutted onto center stage, alchemical jargon stubbornly clung like glitter at a craft party. So next time you snicker at alchemy, remember, the philosopher's stone was really just the stepping stone to atomic numbers. Not bad for an entry-level wizard, and if alchemy ever died out, no one told the vitamin supplement industry. Moreover, alchemists are often thought to have relied solely on mystical beliefs rather than logical reasoning. Picture a medieval scientist in a pointy hat, muttering over bubbling potions. Is that a wizard? Or just an early chemist desperately chasing tenure? The classic image casts alchemists as robed, starry-eyed mystics, obsessed with turning lead into gold, one incantation away from summoning a dragon, or losing their eyebrows in a fiery mishap. The myth insists alchemy was pure superstition, about as scientific as reading tea leaves by candlelight. But history tells a tale less wand-waving, unless you count frantic stirring and reflexes primed for minor explosions. Alchemists were enchanted by mystical symbols. Sure, but they also cataloged every twig, mineral, and foul-smelling liquid they experimented with. They pioneered lab basics like distillation and crystallization, took diligent notes, and embraced glorious trial and error. If alchemy were just magic, Hogwarts would have scored an NSF grant centuries ago. And figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan championed solid empirical investigation, not just hocus pocus. Abracadabra. More like, let's try that again. But this time, write it down. Stereotypes also paint alchemists as wearing distinctive robes and pointy hats, emphasizing their eccentricity. Picture every alchemist dressed like Gandalf's thrifty cousin, billowing robes, oversized hats, and mysterious symbols scribbled everywhere, even on their laundry tags. It's the universal fantasy, right? Wizards and alchemists, all bundled together in one grand cosplay parade of flowing fabrics and impractical headwear. But this stereotype has a backstory that's more oops than opus. Long before Renaissance cosplay was a thing, wizards got their looks straight from ancient epics, while alchemists were just regular folks hoping their latest brew didn't blow their eyebrows off. In reality, medieval alchemists didn't swagger around in velvet robes. They wore whatever wasn't likely to catch fire, or dissolve, on first contact. Early portraits show what historians politely label sturdy work attire. Think stained tunics and less regal mystique, more day 5 of laundry neglect. Sure, heavy robes existed, but those were reserved for scholars, clergy, or the terminally optimistic. Real alchemy required aprons, gloves, and makeshift goggles, because pointy hats might be perfect for stirring cauldrons, but utterly useless in a cramped lab when you're ducking flying beakers. When it came to dodging explosions, fashion casualties were best left to the thrill seekers and fiction writers. Their communication is often depicted as cryptic and filled with riddles. Picture a secret club where the password is, well, you can't even pronounce it, and probably shouldn't try unless you want to summon a very confused librarian. Welcome to the cryptic world of the alchemists, history's original code junkies. These pioneers scribbled instructions in a stew of squiggly symbols, cryptic Latin, and what might as well have been shorthand for wizard fan fiction. For them, Gold was the Red King, Mercury the White Queen, and their notebooks looked like bedtime stories for particularly restless dragons. But don't mistake this for mere artsy whimsy. These riddles were the alchemical equivalent of password protection, crafted to leave rivals utterly baffled and nosy neighbors scratching their heads harder than a philosopher at a crossword puzzle. Some ingredient names, like the philosopher's egg or the green lion, sound way more like garage band names than serious science. Unsurprisingly, alchemists often couldn't decipher each other's scribbles either, making for some truly spectacularly disappointing potlucks. The result? The iconic image of the lone, muttering alchemist-cum-wizard was born. Fortunately, modern chemists are free from such poetic burdens, unless, of course, the safety manual breaks into rhyme, in which case, run. Additionally, it's a common myth that women did not participate in alchemical practices. Move over, Merlin. Turns out women were concocting mysterious brews just as much as their bearded counterparts. The old tale paints alchemy as a dusty frat house, where secret handshakes happened over bubbling cauldrons, while women were supposedly too busy darning socks. Spoiler alert, that story is about as reliable as an ancient horoscope. Historical records show women from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe were elbow-deep in alchemical experiments, not just to whip up better eyeliner. Case in point, Cleopatra the Alchemist and Mary the Jewess. Real pioneers, not the product of some philosopher's stone fever dream. These trailblazers weren't just stirring potions, they invented gear like the distillation apparatus, making the kitchen the original medieval chemistry hotspot. Sure, there were hurdles, hello, patriarchy, but clever disguises, wealthy patrons, or a trusty nun's habit often cracked the lab door open. Their breakthroughs even schooled the men who sometimes forgot to pass along the credit. Luckily, modern historians are finally swapping the invisibility cloak for a spotlight, giving these unsung mistresses of mystery their well-deserved fame. Coupled with this is the belief that alchemists were broadly persecuted as heretics or frauds. Imagine a world where turning lead into gold got you more than viral TikTok fame. It landed you a cozy stay behind bars. Picture Jeff, the medieval employee of the month, promptly fired for overachieving at transmutation. Sorry, Jeff, you're just too good at this whole alchemy thing. Can't have you stealing the throne or the royal treasury. Popular lore paints alchemists as perpetually on the lam, fleeing torch-bearing mobs like Frankenstein's monster after one disastrous experiment. But let's set the record straight. While heretic sounds gloriously dramatic, many alchemists weren't exactly outlaws. They worked openly in royal courts and universities, smashing beakers with the pride of today's tenured professors and the patience of caffeine-fueled grad students. Some monarchs even hired these proto-wizards, hoping for an exclusive magical ATM powered by the fabled Philosopher's Stone. Sure, scams happened. Think of it as history's original pyramid scheme. But most alchemists weren't con artists. Many actually nudged medieval science forward, sowing seeds for modern chemistry without a YouTube tutorial in sight. A few unlucky sorcerers did end up in dungeons, usually for cheating kings, not just suspicious bubbling brews. Religious persecution? Overhyped. Plenty of alchemists were devout, respected, and only occasionally set their labs ablaze. They balanced life as part wizard, part scientist, part hopeful entrepreneur, just without LinkedIn, performance reviews, or the looming threat of failing quantum mechanics. Many assume that all alchemists firmly believed in the literal existence of the Philosopher's Stone. Imagine risking your eyebrows for a magic rock that promised eternal life, and maybe just a little better hair. Welcome to the world of the Philosopher's Stone, medieval chemistry's hottest bling. Think Taylor Swift concert fever, but swap out the glitter for bubbling cauldrons and incense smoke. This wasn't mere lead into gold hustle. The stone was the ultimate all-in-one miracle. Wealth, immortality, the whole enchanted package. Ambitious alchemists from Europe to Asia were downright obsessed, though their secret alchemy club chats were sadly low on group texts. Even the brainiac Isaac Newton got caught up in the stone's hype, so cut yourself some slack next time you fall for a sketchy vitamin supplement ad. Chasing this historical Bitcoin drained fortunes, dignity, and judging by those singed manuscripts, an alarming amount of eyebrow real estate. Alas, no philosopher's stone ever showed up. Just plenty of proof that medieval chemistry was dangerously explosive. Eventually, real chemists moved on to actual science, leaving the magical get-rich-quick dreams and chemical burns smoldering in the dust. There's also a misconception that alchemy was exclusive to medieval Europe. Picture a wizard in a pointy hat, hunched over bubbling potions somewhere in misty medieval Europe. Now toss that image into the nearest cauldron. The Stereotype says alchemy was a secret European club obsessed with turning lead into gold and dodging death. But that's just a tiny ingredient in a much larger, weirder recipe. Alchemy's real roots are a tangled global tapestry stretching through ancient Egypt, China, and India, making Europe less the grand HQ and more like a slightly confused local franchise. Egyptians were mixing potions long before chemistry got its shiny name, or safety goggles. In China, alchemists aimed less at bling and more at immortality, and accidentally invented gunpowder along the way, proving that explosive personal growth is sometimes quite literal. Indian alchemists cooked up health elixirs and experimented with metals centuries before Europe even thought of brewing get-rich-quick gold recipes. Meanwhile, as Europe fumbled around for fool's gold, Arabic scholars were busy preserving, translating, and remixing alchemy like master DJs. So calling alchemy medieval European is like calling pizza strictly Italian, totally ignoring all the wild, spicy, global toppings that made the whole thing delicious. Within these narratives, alchemists are often portrayed as obsessed with concocting potions for immortality. Imagine mixing mysterious powders in the hope of becoming the world's oldest selfie subject. That's the glamorous image we have of alchemists. Wild-haired, wizened wizards hunched over bubbling flasks, feverishly chasing the fabled elixir of immortality. Because seriously, who wouldn't want to outlive their creditors and that one relentless history teacher? From China's Emperor Qin to European mystics, mythmakers spun tales of potions and pills promising endless life. These stories sparked a centuries-long global chemistry craze, basically the first ever cross-cultural FOMO. But let's be honest, most alchemists didn't crack the code to eternal youth. They were far more likely to singe their own eyebrows than to bottle agelessness. And those unicorn horn ingredients? More likely to cause indigestion than immortality. Picture it. If alchemists had succeeded, today's world might be run by grumpy, bearded men from the 15th century. Instead, most walked away with food poisoning and eternal hope. On the bright side, their quirky experiments kicked off modern chemistry. No vampire genes necessary. They are also thought to have rejected technological advancements and progress. Was every alchemist just a medieval hipster, furiously shaking a beaker at the steam engine and muttering about artisanal lead-to-gold transformations before they were cool? That's the pop culture image. Crusty old wizards holed up in gloomy, candlelit basements, treating progress like a rat in the bread pantry. The myth insists alchemists clung to ancient ways like a grumpy uncle griping about smartphones. But here's the real formula. Alchemists were the OG R&D departments, mixing science, magic, and risk assessment, with a healthy dash of ouch that burns. If anyone was living on the bleeding edge, sometimes literally given their experiments, it was these pioneers. They snatched up every shiny new gadget, from advanced distillation gear to fiery furnaces, and reimagined what was possible. Alchemy didn't just grudgingly evolve into chemistry and medicine. It laid the groundwork with a lucrative side hustle inventing lab equipment. If resisting progress means accidentally inventing gunpowder, maybe we should all embrace a little stubbornness. So next time you complain about lab explosions, remember, alchemists made hazardous materials storage downright fashionable. Now, who's up for cleaning the next mercury spill? This leads to the stereotype that alchemists could not distinguish between scientific inquiry and superstition. Picture a lab where the dress code mandates wizard robes and the scent of sulfur passes for air freshener. Here, alchemists stirred mystical beliefs into hands-on experiments, blurring the line between bubbling cauldrons and breaking beakers. Their holy grail? The philosopher's stone, a miracle rock said to turn lead into gold. Spoiler alert, they never found it, except maybe in their most creative bedtime stories. Reading an alchemy textbook was like decoding a riddle wrapped in a secret code. Imagine trying to figure out whether to use bat wings or baking soda. Their science leaned heavily on ancient philosophy. The four elements, earth, water, air, fire, not unearthed by evidence, but plucked straight from the Greeks' brainstorming sessions. Their toolkit, astrology charts, lucky numbers, and talismans. Because if you asked for peer review, you'd probably get a horoscope. Yet for all their mystical shenanigans, alchemists accidentally unlocked the door to real chemistry. The divide between science and superstition only appeared once labs swapped pentagrams for periodic tables, and wizard cloaks for sterile, if admittedly beige, lab coats. Consequently, it is widely believed that alchemists left no lasting legacy in scientific knowledge. If you think alchemists left science empty-handed, think again. Those pointy hats hid more than bad hair days. Legends cast these medieval experimenters as glorified magicians, hopelessly chasing gold and getting lost somewhere between Merlin's beard and modern chemistry. But let's spill the potion. Alchemists were basically the original lab hipsters. They pioneered distillation, sublimation, and a whole cauldron of bubbling tricks, techniques still sizzling away in labs today. Take the alembic, their ancient glass gadget, the great-great-grandparent of your favorite homebrew kit. Their boundless curiosity nudged humanity toward atomic theory. Even if some experiments went out with a bang, Paracelsus famously swapped magic wands for dosage math, practically inventing pharmacology without cracking open a single newt's eye. Sure, their lab notes read like 30% secret code, 70% wild guess, yet for modern chemists, they're pure gold. Hogwarts potions class? Basically an alchemist's man cave. So while the philosopher's stone remained a myth, their real magic was turning proto-science into the science we know today.